All right, let's talk about a story you're probably not seeing on the front pages, but one that can seriously impact the entire North American economy. We're talking about trash. And believe me, this isn't just about what's in your garbage can. This is a high-stakes battle over economics, environmental policy, and international law. So yeah, welcome to the Trash Wars.
So let's just start with a number, 3.46 million tons. Just try to picture that. That is the amount of municipal solid waste. We're talking regular old garbage that crossed the border from Canada into Michigan in just a single year. It's a staggering amount, a constant stream of trucks heading south day in and day out.
And that really begs the question, right? How on earth did something as ordinary as garbage become a geopolitical weapon, a bargaining chip in a massive trade negotiation that could literally define the future of the continent's economy? Well, that's the story we're going to unpack right now.
To really get how we got here, you just have to follow the money, or, in this case, follow the trash. Because the reason millions of tons of refuse are flowing south from Ontario into Michigan, well, it comes down to pure, simple economics.
This table tells you pretty much everything you need to know. A tipping fee, that's just what it costs to dump or tip a ton of waste at a landfill. And just look at the difference here. In Ontario, it can be over $100 a ton, but in Michigan, a measly 36 cents. It's not just a little cheaper to ship trash hundreds of miles to Michigan. For the waste haulers, it is an absolute financial no-brainer. Michigan has essentially become the go-to landfill for the entire Great Lakes region.
And here you can see the result of that huge economic pull. Almost 15%, 14.35% to be exact, of all the waste being buried in Michigan's landfills isn't even from the United States. That Canadian slice of the pie, that's a massive amount of trash crossing an international border, and you better believe it's creating a political firestorm.
So this economic reality, it's no longer just about dollars and cents. It has exploded into a political flashpoint, a conflict that's really personified by two very powerful leaders with very, very different agendas.
So on one side, you've got Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and her argument is pretty straightforward. Michigan's landfills are filling up fast. Some estimates say they only have about 21 years of space left, and she's arguing that the state just can't afford to be the region's cheap dumping ground, especially at the expense of its own environment. So what's her proposed solution? A 1,289% increase in the state's tipping fee, taking it from just 36 cents a ton all the way up to $5. And the goal here isn't just about raising money for cleanups. It's a strategic move designed to make dumping in Michigan so expensive that it's just not an option anymore for those out-of-country haulers.
Now you hop across the border, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford's government sees this as a direct economic threat. I mean, think about it. If the U.S. border suddenly closed, or that massive fee hike went through, Ontario would be left with a literal mountain of garbage with nowhere to put it. It could cripple major cities like Toronto.
Citing what they're calling the Trump threat of potential trade disruptions, the Ford government pushed through this really controversial piece of legislation called Bill 5. What it does is it fast-tracks a new landfill by completely sidestepping a full environmental review that they had previously promised. They're framing it as a matter of waste sovereignty. Basically, the idea that Ontario has to be able to handle its own trash without relying on the U.S.
And this timeline just shows you how quickly everything has escalated. In 2025, Ontario makes its move with Bill 5. Then, in early 2026, Michigan fires back with its proposed fee hike. And that's when the conflict goes federal. You see the Supreme Court strike down one set of tariffs, only for the Trump administration to pivot and impose a brand new 10% tariff regime just 4 days later. This is a multi-front battle, and it is moving at lightning speed.
So you're probably wondering, why can't Michigan just ban Canadian trash, right? If they don't want it, just stop it at the border. Well, the answer is way more complicated than you might think, and it all has to do with the complex rules of international trade.
And here is the really strange part. Well, you and I look at trash and see a liability, something you want to get rid of. International trade law sees it as a commodity, like it's a product being bought and sold. And because it's considered a commodity, it's actually protected by free trade rules. And that changes absolutely everything.
The rulebook for this whole game is the USMCA. That's the huge trade pact that governs pretty much all commerce between the US, Canada, and Mexico. It sets the terms for everything from car parts to avocados, and yep, you guessed it, that also includes the garbage trade.
A key principle in this whole thing is something called national treatment. Basically, it means Michigan is not allowed to discriminate against Canadian garbage by charging it some kind of special higher fee. Any fee hike, like that $5 proposal, has to apply to everyone. That includes Michigan's own in-state trash haulers. It's a really clever, if complicated way to try and solve a local problem while still playing by the rules of international law.
And of course, In this new era of trade wars, there's a mountain of paperwork. To avoid getting hit with steep tariffs, waste haulers have to prove their product, their trash, is from North America. That means getting a certificate of origin, keeping super detailed supply chain records, and passing customs inspections. For the companies that are moving all this garbage, it's a bureaucratic nightmare, and if they don't comply, the financial hit could be huge.
So, what does this all mean for the future? Well, what seems like a local dispute over trash is now shaping up to be a major test for the entire North American economy. Trust me, this is way bigger than just some garbage trucks on a highway.
Coming up in July of 2026, the entire USMCA trade agreement is up for a mandatory review. This is a huge deal, a high-stakes negotiation where all three countries have to decide the future of the pact. And this little dispute between Ontario and Michigan over waste, it's become a bellwether, a critical test case. The fate of North American trade could literally hinge on a pile of garbage.
And that review, it could go one of three ways. The best case, a simple extension, business as usual. But the pact could also fracture, with the U.S. maybe trying to cut separate deals with Canada and Mexico. And the worst-case scenario, a complete failure to agree. That would trigger something called the Sunset Clause, a 10-year countdown to the end of the agreement, which would throw North American supply chains into absolute chaos.
And this isn't just about trash anymore, not by a long shot. It's a full-blown trade war. The U.S. slaps on tariffs, and Ontario threatens to retaliate by jacking up the price of the massive amounts of electricity it sells to the U.S. It is a really dangerous game of economic chicken, with both sides using trash and power as their weapons.
So in the end, this entire conflict, everything from Michigan's landfills to Ontario's legislature, all the way up to these super high-level trade negotiations, it all boils down to this one fundamental question. Is waste just another product, a commodity to be traded freely across borders, or is it an environmental problem that should be solved at home? The answer is going to help determine the future of North American trade, and it all started with a pile of garbage.